Tonight, student loans on the line. Supreme Court oral arguments over the president's plan to delete student loan debt.
Plus, chemical abortion complications.
Of course, pregnancy in almost every case is not a life-threatening illness.
A federal judge's ruling could force the FDA to withdraw chemical abortion pills from the market.
And
racism is still alive in Mississippi.
Honoring Emmett Till, remembering the lynching and murder of a 14-year-old boy that helped ignite the civil rights movement.
All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Testing the limits of the president's student loan forgiveness plan. Welcome to Faith Nation in Washington. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening, I'm Jenna Browder. The president wants to wipe out student debt to the tune of $400 billion. But does he have the authority to do it? That's the question before the Supreme Court.
Currently on hold, the federal debt forgiveness plan never really got off the ground, trapped in legal limbo by Republican-appointed judges. Now the justices of the High Court are preparing to weigh in. Caitlin Burke has been following today's oral arguments. Caitlin, can you remind us what's at the heart of this case?
John, Jenna, the key questions here revolve around authority. Does the Biden administration have the legal authority to bypass Congress to spend money on forgiving student loans? And do states and individuals in this case have authority to sue the federal government?
We're going to fight to defend the rule of law and defend the Constitution.
I'm confident the legal authority to carry out that plan is there.
The two cases before the Supreme Court both center on President Biden's $400 billion student loan forgiveness plan. The first, filed by 6 Republican-led states, argues the program is an illegal abuse of power with federal spending that doesn't have congressional consent.
After many failed legislative efforts, the Secretary seeks to write off nearly $500 billion in loans for over 40 million borrowers. No statute authorizes this sweeping action.
This is not an assertion of regulatory authority at all. This is the administration of a benefits program. In the context of a benefits program, there's not that same reason to hesitate about what Congress might have intended, because it's perfectly logical for Congress to broadly empower the executive to provide benefits, especially in a crisis situation or an emergency like we've seen with COVID-19.
Justices grilled Nebraska Solicitor General James Campbell over whether the states represented in the suit actually suffered any harm by Biden's plan. Missouri, for example, claims it has standing because of damages the student loan forgiveness would have on Mohila, a state entity that services loans.
Here, the state has derived very substantial benefits from setting up Mohila as an independent body with financial distance from the state and sue-and-be-sued authority. So why isn't Mohila responsible for deciding whether to bring this suit?
Several of the justices also questioned the state's argument that the education secretary did not act within authority given to him by Congress to erase debt.
What you're saying is now we're going to give judges the right to decide how much aid to give them, instead of the person with the expertise and the experience, the Secretary of Education, who's been dealing with educational issues and the problems surrounding student loans.
The federal government claims the HEROES Act of 2003, a statute enacted after 9/11, gives the Education Secretary the ability to waive or modify student loans during a national emergency.
The whole point of this statute, its central mission and function, is to ensure that in the face of a national emergency that is causing financial harm to borrowers, the Secretary can do something. He can alter the student loan program to ensure that they're not worse off.
The second case revolves around 2 students who claim they should have qualified for relief under the new loan forgiveness program. As in Biden v. Nebraska, they're looking to block the president's plan on the grounds that the HEROES Act does not authorize the Secretary of Education to cancel $500 billion in debt. In both cases, the Biden administration appears to face an uphill battle. Conservatives currently make up a majority of the High Court, and several of those justices were clearly skeptical. A ruling on the president's plan is expected sometime this summer. John, Jenna?
All right, Caitlin Burke, we'll just have to wait and see. Well, now to the battle over abortion. As a result of the Supreme Court's overturning Roe last summer, many pro-choice advocates started pushing for greater access to chemical abortion pills.
But an upcoming ruling from a federal judge could limit that access. A decision is expected any day in the case that will decide if the FDA should take it off the market. Abigail Robertson shows us why pro-life advocates argue these drugs should have never been approved by the FDA in the first place.
These chemical abortions currently account for more than 50% of all abortions in the United States. For many years, the FDA sought to expand access to the at-home pill regimen, even though a number of doctors and medical organizations question its safety and its approval more than 2 decades ago.
From approval, and then every time the FDA has loosened restrictions, it has gone against its own rules to do so.
Dr. Ingrid Skop tells CBN News the FDA initially approved the medication under a category called Subpart H, which is for drugs that treat life-threatening illnesses.
Of course, pregnancy in almost every case is not a life-threatening illness, and there already were surgical abortions that were available, so this did not add anything new. And in fact, studies since that time have shown us that women have 4 times as many complications after chemical abortions. So they added a drug that was subpar compared to what was already available.
The first approval in 2000 allowed the use of mifepristone to terminate a pregnancy through 7 weeks gestation. In 2016, the okay was given to extend the timing through 10 weeks gestation. Skop says a third of the women undergoing chemical abortions are under 18, although in this case, the FDA didn't conduct any study on pediatric populations during the approval process.
The FDA is required to do pediatric studies, but they just waived that requirement without explanation.
She also argues women who take the abortion-inducing pills are not adequately prepared for what comes next.
This is a very difficult process for women. They bleed a lot. Essentially, it's like labor. They have a lot of pain. And often when they deliver the pregnancy, they will see their unborn or their child in the toilet. And at 8 weeks, he's about the size and shape of a gummy bear. He's clearly identifiable as a human being.
1 in 20 women have a complication from chemical abortions. Skop says she treated one woman just last month.
In this woman's case, she bled all the way back to Texas from California, bled for another 2 months, and then finally came to my emergency room where I was able to do a surgery and remove the dead tissue that had been sitting there for 2 months.
Last January, the FDA declared that abortion pills are safe enough to be prescribed through telehealth visits.
The industry, as far as chemical abortion goes, tells them it's safer than Tylenol or a shot of penicillin. So when they do have a complication, if they're the 1 in 20 women that need surgery, they are shocked and they feel that they've been misled.
The FDA also cleared the way for retail pharmacies like CVS and Walgreens to begin providing the medication.
We have spent so long in this country trying to get drugs that take life off of the streets. And now our federal government has said, well, it can be sold at your local pharmacy. That is a decision we vehemently disagree with.
Brent Leatherwood from the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission says many big pharmacy chains jumped at the opportunity to sell the pill.
Our team, immediately, we sent a letter to the CEOs of those pharmacies to say, we disagree with this decision and would ask you to please reconsider. Because a pharmacy should be about care and helping to extend life, not to end it.
Abortion advocates in West Virginia and North Carolina, where state laws restrict use of chemical abortions, have sued, claiming federal rules should prevail when it comes to setting drug standards. This is likely just the beginning of legal battles surrounding access to chemical abortions. Multiple states are pursuing laws that would either ban the sale of these abortion-inducing pills or stop women from accessing them without first visiting a doctor in person. Reporting from Washington, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Abby. And here with us now is Sue Leibel with the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America. Sue, welcome. Good to have you with us this evening. So 1 in 20 women suffer complications after taking these abortion pills. How potentially dangerous are these pills?
Actually, they're very dangerous. In fact, ironically, they're more dangerous than a surgical abortion that had been legal all these years under Roe. It's almost like they're mailing they want to mail the coat hanger to the woman. You mentioned 1 in 4 has complications from the pills. Anywhere from 3 to 8% of women will require surgery to fix those complications. And if it's in the second trimester, that rises to 38%. Almost 40% of women, if they take them in the second trimester, are going to need surgery. The risks are great. They're preying on pregnant women and young women who are seeking abortions. They're scared. They're not checking. They're not doing a Yelp review. They're not checking into this. And it seems so easy to take a pill, and it's just the opposite.
Sue, you just mentioned the risks, but shortly after last summer's ruling, demand for chemical abortion skyrocketed. Do you have an idea of the picture of where things stand now?
I think it's probably, I mean, the abortion industry is advertising this like crazy, getting the ads on girls' phones. I mean, the dorm bathroom has become the new abortion clinic. The industry shows no signs of letting up, no signs of actually providing informed consent or medical conditions to rule out pre-existing conditions, things like that. It's just getting worse.
So why do you think the FDA and many pharmacies have been so quick to approve and sell these chemical abortion drugs?
I think there's a lot of money on the table, and I think they're preying on vulnerable women. And enough is enough. That's why this lawsuit is so important. It's just, we've talked about this for so long. It's time that hopefully a judge will give it a fair review, look at the process, the political process that the FDA went through, not their usual standard process that they would any other drug. And it's all been politics, and I think there's a profit motive here.
If a judge, Sue, rules against FDA approval of these chemical abortions, what's next in the fight? Does that end the legal battle?
No, it doesn't. I'm confident that the abortion industry will continue to appeal and find a way to do that. But also keep in mind that now that Roe has overturned and the Dobbs decision is allowing states, each state to regulate abortion, there will still be surgical abortions in blue states, let's say, or states that want to be pro-abortion. They'll still offer that. Even if the pills go off the market. However, if that's the case, and I reluctantly say this, but if it is, there would at least be some medical oversight and back to a medical procedure. But we'd like to offer that there are other alternatives. Abortion isn't the only alternative. Abortion isn't the best alternative for women. There are plenty of other services, and there's much more assistance and help out there to help a woman that's in a vulnerable position. And we'd like to make sure that women know that.
Susan Leibel with the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, thank you so much for your time and joining us tonight.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Coming up, aid to Ukraine. The U.S. has sent billions. Now lawmakers from both sides want answers as to how it's being spent.
Welcome back. The border crisis now front and center in the GOP-controlled House. House Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee claim Secretary Mayorkas lied about having operational control of the southern border, arguing the Biden administration's elimination of 89 border policies is emboldening drug cartels to bring massive amounts of deadly drugs into the United States. Tuesday's hearing featured emotional testimony from a mother who lost 2 sons to fentanyl poisoning.
And you talk about children being taken away from their parents. My children were taken away from me. This should not be politicized. It's not about race. Fentanyl doesn't care about race. You talk about welcoming those crossing our border, seeking protection. You're welcoming drug dealers across our border. You're giving them protection. You're not protecting our children.
As the United States sees record numbers of migrants crossing the southern border, Republicans say the budget for securing the border didn't decrease in January 2021, but but the policies did.
To the war in Ukraine, lawmakers on both sides seem to agree on one thing: the need for tougher scrutiny of U.S. military aid to the war-torn country. A Pentagon watchdog noting during a House hearing today that Ukraine will continue to depend on assistance from the U.S. and allies for some period of time.
If the world walked away from Ukraine, then the balance would tip in Russia's favor, but there is no reason to believe.
And how many more rounds of aid do you expect? And I say this as someone who supported him and wants to continue to support him, but just in terms of the American public, how many more times do you think Congress needs to provide aid?
You know, it's difficult, and it's difficult because we don't know the course and trajectory of the conflict. The conflict could end 6 months from now, it could end 2 years from now, or 3 years from now.
To date, the U.S. has spent nearly $32 billion on security assistance in Ukraine. Some $12 billion more has been allocated to help in the fight. The U.S. has until September to spend that money. A tragic death that sparked a defining moment in America. Up next, the life and legacy of Emmett Till.
Well, among America's most tragic and shameful moments in history, the 1955 brutal killing of a 14-year-old black teen whose name was Emmett Till.
The outpouring of anger and grief following his lynching helped launch the civil rights movement. Now his hometown is honoring his life and legacy. Brody Carter brings us that story from the Mississippi Delta.
Racism is still alive in Mississippi.
Standing just feet away from where Emmett Till was lynched, the mayor of Glendora, Mississippi, talks about the young man's final moments.
The very first beating that he received was just right there on that pile of rocks, and the blood was washed out of the truck here on these grounds. His clothes burned on these grounds, and came here to dispose of the body.
For many who live here, the Mississippi Delta is grief. Its history steeped in racism and generational poverty, where sharecroppers worked the land, making wealth for plantation owners. And even after all this time, Emmett Till's story still haunts the Delta. Glendora's mayor hopes the statue will keep his legacy alive.
By making sure that our young folks never forget the heinous act that took place, and to remember not to be afraid to stand up.
After being beaten, shot in the head, and tied to a cotton gin fan with barbed wire, 14-year-old Emmett Till's body was discarded here in the Tallahatchie River.
Mayor Thomas must wrestle with his family's legacy here, including this, how his father helped tie Till to the cotton gin fan. It's where a local museum commemorating Till stands today.
Cotton was king for Mississippi. This Delta we had billboards saying, kept the cotton king of the world.
State Senator David Lee Jordan has memories as well, sitting in the Sumner County Courthouse watching the two men charged with Till's murder get acquitted.
On the stand, they had the mortician from Greenwood, Mississippi, a friend that knew us. So he said there was a ring. He found a ring on his finger, and it had his father's initial in it. And that's why he was able to identify the body.
Jordan says his purpose is to make life better for the people in the Delta. He recently led an effort to install a 9-foot, $150,000 bronze statue of Emmett Till.
This larger-than-life statue of Emmett Till, dedicated last year, stands boldly over the city of Greenwood, Mississippi, not far from where Till was kidnapped. It also reads that Till's sacrifice in 1955 is what inspired the civil rights movement.
A new movie on Till is also helping honor his legacy and keep it alive.
The lynching of my son has shown me that what happens to any of us, anywhere in the world, had better be the business of us all.
However, some believe the memorialization of Till via movies and statues have ripped off the Band-Aid of wounds that never healed.
The danger is that some people would look at the monument going up and say, we did it. We're done. We've addressed this issue. Let's move on.
That's part of the work, but it's a deeper work
that have to go on in our hearts. And the church have to be a part of that. And I think we should.
In the same courthouse where an all-white jury acquitted the two men, Reverend Willie Williams preserves Till's memory and says people here are still dealing with his death.
We talk a lot about reconciliation, and to me, it's a twofold as relate to biblical reconciliation.
Williams and his team at the Emmett Till Interpretive Center across from the courthouse say today's national conversation on racism needs to include healing and reconciliation.
The church is made of people, and that it's up to people to choose, to bring light to some of the situations that I think sometimes we often try to divorce ourselves from.
The solution is to try to uplift humanity and do our part, and not, allow hate and unforgiveness and destroy us from the inside out.
Till's lynching is one of more than 4,000 that took place during the Jim Crow era, following the Civil War and into the 20th century. Little is known today about those horrendous crimes. Leaders in the Delta say it's up to the next generation to rise, tackle race relations head on, and pave a new path forward.
That's why I say people are more alike than they are different. And now we're at the largest picture of Emmett Till anywhere in the country in Greenwood, Mississippi. I think we're going to eventually get there, but it's going to be too late for a lot of people.
Reporting in the Mississippi Delta, Brody Carter, CBN News.
Finally tonight, turning the tables on a beloved worker at a Christian school.
That's right. Usually Chef Deb, as she's called, is the one doling out love, preparing meals for kids at Christian Chapel Academy in Columbia, Missouri. But parents and teachers flipped the script when her car broke down. In an elaborate reveal, she took a ride-along in what she thought was a coworker's new car.
We weren't completely honest with you. Mr. Brent did not get a new car. Some people who love you very much.
I want to thank you guys. Thank you for the blessing. I love you. Thank you for loving me. Because God is love. Gotta go home now.
The school's principal says this was an example of their motto, being moved with compassion to act when you see a need. What a great way to end the show.
I love this story. Congratulations to Chef Deb.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to do it for tonight's Faith Nation.
Have a great night.